I am, without any further ado, going to introduce one of our most favorite people, a man who should have been UN ambassador for a very, very long time. Our friend, our colleague, I urge you to get his book, which is advertised in our registration area. John Bolton is a very special person, and his book is an eye-opener into the state of affairs in international law and the international politics today. John Bolton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks to Herb London and Ann Bajewski and the Hudson Institute for hosting this event, which I think is extremely important and extremely timely. And thanks to all of you for turning out so early on a Sunday. I think it's going to be an excellent day. I'm sorry I can't stay the entire day, especially to hear Norm Coleman toward the end of the day, somebody who has done an outstanding job during what I hope is only his first term as a senator and become an expert on UN matters, somebody who probed into the problems of the UN's Oil for Food program and has taken a particular interest in the difficulties of the UN system, including most recently introducing legislation in the Senate that would defund the Human Rights Council that Ann has just been describing, a body that even the New York Times and the Washington Post, if you can believe it, say is as bad or worse than its predecessor, the UN Human Rights Commission. I think Senator Coleman's bill is the kind of activity that we need more of from Congress. I wish we had more from the administration to go after programs at the UN that are fundamentally illegitimate, and by defunding them indicate that we're simply not going to accept this kind of behavior. So in any event, I think it's you've got an excellent day's activities ahead of you, and again, thanks to the Hudson Institute for putting this together. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the relationship between Israel and the United States as it plays out at the UN, and to try and keep those remarks brief so I can respond to any questions you have. But I think that one of the things that's perhaps not so well understood in watching what happens at the UN is that in addition to all the other burdens that Israel bears, many of which Ann described for you, it bears another burden as well, and that is that in many instances it serves as a surrogate for the United States, for people who are unwilling or for whatever reason afraid of attacking the United States directly. Attacking Israel is almost as much fun, and that a lot of the criticism aimed at Israel, intentionally or otherwise, is also criticism directed at the United States, and you can see this as it arises in a variety of different contexts in the Security Council in particular, a body that was marginal during the Cold War because of the vetoes of the Western powers and the Soviet Union, and a body that, despite the end of the Cold War, is well on the way to marginalizing itself against the greatest threats of our time, the threat of international terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. This demonstrates itself in a lot of important ways. The inability of the Security Council or the UN as a whole to come up with a definition of terrorism. You know, it's pretty hard to be effective against a threat like terrorism if you can't define what it is, and in the UN, despite substantial effort over a long period of time, we've never come up with a definition because there are still a number of countries that think you can distinguish among forms of terrorism. And the efforts that have been made in a variety of different contexts, as Ann mentioned, even after the repeal of the Zionism is Racism resolution to keep Israel isolated, are as well manifestations of a desire to limit American influence. So the fact that Israel is not a member of any regional group, among other implications, means that until there's a real change, either from association with the Western group or something else, Israel's never going to be a non-permanent member of the Security Council. In fact, as one wit once described it, there are 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Each year there are 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council, but there's only one permanent non-member of the Security Council, and that's Israel. Now, it's perfectly clear that a lot of what goes on at the UN with respect to Israel and the United States is theater. It's not intended to affect any substantive decision. It's intended for public consumption beyond the halls of the UN. And this is demonstrated repeatedly whenever there's a Security Council meeting on something having to do with Arab-Israeli affairs or Gaza or the West Bank. Most Security Council meetings that you see in the famous picture of the Security Council chamber are about as exciting as watching grass grow. The meetings are scripted in advance. The real work has taken place elsewhere. People go and read statements. They don't listen to each other. They just read the statements and then get up and leave, except, in my experience, when there's something having to do with Israel. Then the Security Council chamber room is full. All the ambassadors are present. The public galleries are filled. There's an atmosphere of great expectation, and the reason is people want to show that there's something important going on, even when members of the Council are simply reading the same scripts that they read before. This was graphically demonstrated last summer during the Israel-Hezbollah war when we had meeting after meeting that served no purpose other than pictures for the television. Although I will say, as I recount this story in my book, at one point in the Council, the deputy representative from Tanzania, who was sitting next to me because of they were going under the name United Republic of Tanzania, so they were right next to the United States. The deputy perm rep turned to me as Dan Gillerman, the Israeli ambassador, was delivering a very effective rebuttal of whatever the day's charge was. The fellow from Tanzania turned to me and said, "Why do the Arabs keep asking for these meetings? All they do is give Gillerman a chance to make these speeches." But learning is slow at the United Nations, and so anyway, the fact is many of the issues that are discussed in the context of purported criticism of Israel actually directly affect the United States, and there's an important example from the deliberations over Hezbollah last summer that led to Resolution 1701. And I use this as an example. There are many others, but this is a particularly important one for the United States. After the Hezbollah attack across the blue line and Israel's response in self-defense, Israel was criticized repeatedly for the disproportionate use of force. This is a way of saying in UN terms that right of self-defense is actually illegitimate because you're doing something more than you need to do to respond in self-defense. Now, in fact, what Israel started to do, although I think didn't finish, was respond not only to the particular attack in the summer of last year, but to go after the threat posed by Hezbollah in its entirety. I asked at the time what a proportionate response from Israel would have been. Were they required simply to kill 3 Hezbollah terrorists and kidnap 2 and fire a couple rockets across the blue line in the opposite direction? Is that what they were limited to? Is that what a proportionate use of force means? Would that argument have meant in World War II that after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States was limited to sinking an equivalent number of aircraft carriers and capital battleships, and then we would have had to have stopped? I mean, this is an argument that is so fundamentally fallacious that it's hard to know whether to laugh at it or to try and rebut it seriously. But the point is, given American military capacity, we are always likely to be met with an argument that we are using disproportionate force when we respond to an attack on our interests or our friends and allies around the world. So although it sounds like a limited point of criticism of Israel to say they're responding with disproportionate force in answering a Hezbollah attack, underlying this criticism is something that relates directly to American security. And that's why there was such an intensity in the Security Council and such feeling by Kofi Annan, despite his reputation as being friendly to Israel, the vehemence with which he pushed the attack against the so-called disproportionate use of force by Israel, I think is very revealing. Now, we're going to see this conflation of